Welcome to Kev Talks, Real World Global Logistics. I'm Kevin Parkerson.
And I'm Kevin Higgins. Together we bring you over 60 years in combined experience in global logistics.
In each episode, we'll dive into the latest industry trends, share practical tips, celebrate wins, and share stories from the logistics front lines, all while helping businesses optimize their logistics operations. All right, Kevin, let's talk about the real unsung heroes of the freight world.
You talking about the customs broker who magically clears a shipment right before the port shut down?
Exactly. That's close, but I'm talking more about managing payments across borders. So moving goods internationally, globally is one thing. Keeping cash flowing smoothly across different currencies and payment terms, that's a whole different kind of logistics.
Yeah, exactly. For a lot of freight companies, handling payments and finance can feel like hauling a double load uphill. Slow, complicated, and one wrong move, and you're in the ditch.
Yeah, let's be honest though. Paper invoices, delayed payments, credit headaches aren't just annoying, they can really choke a business. So today's guest, he's on a mission to fix that.
Yeah, he's not just fixing it; he's flipping the script. With HaulPay, he's helping freight companies automate invoicing, streamline payments, and unlock cash flow like never before.
So joining us today is Steve Kochan, president of HaulPay, a guy who knows firsthand how to bridge the gap between technology and transportation. From his early days managing logistics to founding Comfreight and leading HaulPay, he's seen every side of the payment puzzle, and he's here to break it down.
Yeah, so whether you're a carrier, broker, or just someone who loves hearing how fintech is shaking up the supply chain, stick around. This one's going to be good.
All right, let's dive in.
All right, let's bring Steve on. And where's he at?
He left.
Yeah, no, it's me. I got to hit the right button.
There he is.
Steve, welcome. Don't put me in charge.
Not that easy to get rid of me. So,
well, welcome,
Steve,
man.
Yeah, welcome.
Yeah, nice to finally get on here with you guys. I'm excited to talk about some of the history, and it's a very interesting cross section of what a lot of us had experience with, and some areas that I never thought I'd ever end up becoming a subject matter expert in, if I'm completely honest. So
yeah, well, let's dive into that then. Let's share with the audience a little bit more about your background and career.
Yeah, so I got my degree at a state school here in Southern California called Long Beach State. I originally thought I was going to go work for the State Department. I was a big poli-sci and economics nerd, and almost went to grad school, but I was graduating my undergrad right in the middle of the 2008 economic crisis.
Oh, wow.
So I had friends who were were a little older than me that were having a tough time getting a job, and even some guys that were even older than that were going out to MBA school and just didn't have anything. So a friend of mine said, "Hey, we're working for this air freight forwarding company out in Rancho Dominguez. You should come check it out. Like sales reps there are making like 120, 150K a year. This is back in 2008, so that's pretty good money. And they just have a BA, and I'm like, all right, well, I don't want to rush into grad school, and kind of soured on the idea of going to work for the government. So I took a chance on it. Before I could actually have my first day at work at that company, they were acquired by C.H. Robinson.
Oh my gosh.
So I had to go through their vetting process again. They were actually pretty happy to have me, sent me out to Eden Prairie, trained on all their software. They kind of have a Kool-Aid indoctrination process there. I think they still do. It's a couple weeks that branches throughout the network, and you guys can send their folks to get trained up. So that was a heck of a crash course. It was fantastic, frankly. I did a lot of fun there over the summer. And then they came back after about 2.5 weeks or so in Minnesota and Minneapolis area, and they said, "Hey, train everybody that on the software that we just acquired." so I, I'm only maybe, I don't know, a month and a half into the industry, and now I've got to train staff that Robinson acquired on Robinson software, or at least help them out, because they only had a couple corporate folks even floating around at the branch. So long story short, I got a pretty big crash course in freight tech, within the first couple months of
I
my
bet. Yeah.
first freight job, if you want to see it that way. And at C.H. Robinson, which even back then was probably on the cutting edge for TMS and everything you could think of, including quick pay. That was something I saw early on that I didn't see much of at all.
Yep.
And they were really the ones who championed quick pay, and that gave them a big competitive advantage on the buy side for forwarding and their brokerage, right? So
Yep.
anyway, long after that, I went on to I got recruited by one of my customers. It was a guy who used to work for Daylight who started up another more of a freight forwarding, freight brokerage startup. So a lot of international on one side, domestic for routing on the other. Said, hey, come over here, help me set up the domestic side, set up the carrier network operation, especially truckload. So I did that for the next couple of years. And then I kind of started getting this feeling that, there wasn't a lot of good software to solve some of the problems that I was experiencing at this very small, I think we're 6 to 8 people total, including our sales agents, little broker forwarder. So seeing that big disparity between Fortune 100, top of the heap, Robinson, and this little tiny freight brokerage forwarder that had some really good key accounts, like solid big accounts in the LA area, I had to cobble together between spreadsheets, multiple load boards, LTL portals, like whatever I could to create an operational foundation for a domestic side to this company. And it was really difficult. And I started to think, you know, maybe there's something that I can do that might be better for this. And that eventually became what would be Comfreight. So I did a little bit of
Okay.
consulting, started working on what would become Comfreight. And that basically evolved from talking to shippers, talking to brokers, mostly in the LA area, port area, about what some of their challenges were. Now, load boards work just fine, but back then it was hard to get price discovery without a ton of phone calls, right? A lot of back and forth. It's gotten a lot. It's improved depending on how you look at it since then with all the tech, especially over the last 5 to 8 years. But back in 2011, 2012, that range, you had a couple big load boards, and that was about it, right? And if you had specialty freight or other stuff, it was hard to kind of bid it out. You guys may or may not, or some of your viewers and an audience might have heard of like U-Ship. There was some cool features in U-Ship like reverse auction, but it was really dedicated to more like the eBay side of things, the small
Right.
hot shots and stuff like that. So I kind of took what I thought were some of the best parts of their product, some of the challenges I experienced more with the commercial freight side, and just started cooking up what would become a website and eventually a little app to do like reverse auction or different styles of bidding processes for truckload. And that's really what Comfreight was. It was me nights and weekends for about 3.5 years,
I'm
just kind of
sure.
building it on
Yeah.
my own, like basically a freight nerd, if you want to call me that. Just trying to solve my own problems, really. And more than anything else, I wasn't initially looking for like a big windfall or anything out of it. But I started to get the attention of some foreign investors that I wasn't even aware knew we existed. And at that point, I had a small active user base on the platform that were probably paying, somewhere about 20K in monthly recurring subscriptions, which was enough
Wow.
for me to take a little bit of a distribution, keep paying a contractor for some of the harder coding I couldn't do. So that was cool. But then what happened was I ended up basically uh, got was asked to run a little project management side of a company that did digital marketing here in Long Beach. And I guess you could say the cool thing about that was it gave me some live experience on how to run an engineering team, basically, that I hadn't had before, right? It was all freight experience before that. And having a little more experience actually learning how to recruit software developers and stuff like that was really helpful. So I'm
Yeah.
basically kind of like moonlighting, building this freight matching bidding app, and now I'm starting to get investor interest. That takes 2016. That kind of gave me indication that things were getting serious and I needed to do something
Yeah.
with it. And
Yeah.
I went full time with it in 2017. And about 3 or 4 years later, well, not even that, 2017, I pivoted to start building what would become HaulPay. And I really say from 2017 to today, that stretch is really where HaulPay started to get developed, and we started to move into fintech. So the load board became kind of a value add and a lead gen tool by 2018 or so. And from that point on, we were just focused on fintech. I started raising some money from investors.
So, Steve, have you always been, entrepreneurial? Did you like sell rocks to neighbors when you were young?
I mean, I was always a kind of a science nerd, I guess you say. I was always playing with model airplanes, and that was probably my biggest thing was model airplanes. And
Okay.
I like building stuff,
Yeah.
and kind of designing things. I had a few small bit like little businesses when I was a kid. I like put flyers together, ran around, put them on everyone's door in the neighborhood. Hey, I'll watch your house while you're on vacation, and do your gardening, or mow your lawn while you're out. Just take care of your I think it was pet sitting was one of the things. If you're on vacation,
Yeah.
was one of the things
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
did for a while, just so I could make a little extra money. And but most of my focus, I would say, is more on leadership. I really did want to go serve the country for a long time. I did a lot of stuff with that in high school, and
Okay.
was in Civil Air Patrol and spent a lot of time doing like
Oh, wow.
stuff there, leadership training. So I think it was a combination of leadership and the building
In the
stuff.
building.
And I was
Yeah.
like, this just fit all of that pretty
Yeah.
well as I
Yeah.
started getting going.
Well, let's pivot a little bit. So you went from ComFreight to HaulPay. Were there any significant challenges that you encountered during rebranding of that, and how did that transition work?
Yeah, great question. So HaulPay, initially I named HaulPay in I think 2017 as like that's going to be our new focus. It's going to be the main product of the company called ComFreight. Um, a lot of startups would probably have just killed off ComFreight, restarted a new name, and said, "Hey, it's a brand new company." But I have no shame. I'm like, I don't care if there's a 3 or 4 year moonlighting history. Like, in fact, you guys probably know this in our industry, it helps to know that you've been around for a little while in
Yeah.
some
Exactly.
cases, right? Like,
Yep.
Yeah.
okay, these guys are just popping up out of nowhere from, with Silicon Valley backers or something like that. I had gotten a little bit of capital investment, probably a lot smaller compared to some of the bigger deals in freight tech we've seen more recently, but enough to get a small team together. And it was just basically like, hey, let's call it HaulPay. We'll still have ComFreight as the main name because I don't know what else we're going to build that's going to hang off of the ComFreight platform. In retrospect, I wish I just started calling it HaulPay a lot sooner, because that actual switch over to just call it HaulPay happened I think it's about almost 2 years ago now, and
Okay.
that's been a lot easier for us just to communicate branding. So just tip for everyone out there. Um, Keep it simple, right? It's that
Yep.
KISS thing, right? So just pick one name, 2 syllables, maybe three. Keep it as short and easy to communicate. It encapsulates some of what you're doing. That's just going to make it a lot easier. It makes it cheaper to advertise and do branding too, because when you're having to remind people that it's a product of, so that's one thing I definitely learned. But that's kind of where it came from, and
Okay.
that's mostly what I've been focused on since about 2017.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's great advice because I know a lot of companies struggle with, well, this is my name and this is my product, and we'll have 10 products. And then, one of those products takes off, and then that's what their identity becomes. And, so I think that's great. That's great insight, great
I think in the
advice.
early period it was probably the right move, right? For the
Yeah.
I'd say from that first 2 to 3 years after we raised a little bit of money and I had a small team, we really weren't completely sure how big the load board might be as a component of the business, how tied in it was going to be with the factoring and the payment stuff. And just eventually, we realized that it was good enough the way it was, and we really needed to focus our efforts on the finance and credit stuff
Yeah.
because it's a really
Okay.
difficult problem to solve.
So share with the audience, how really HaulPay differentiates itself from, what would be a traditional freight factoring type service. What does HaulPay do?
Yeah, so when I first decided, hey, maybe I should pivot into fintech, it came out of talking to actual users of the Confrate load board and the marketplace app, right? Just my little MVP
Nice.
users. And a lot of these were small carriers. Mostly the ones I talked to, they're the most passionate, said, hey, look, we feel like it's a necessary evil that we have to use these factoring companies. And frankly, a lot of them are pretty predatory. Like they lock us into these situations. If we have a bad experience, we can't get out of them. We have to restart a new authority in some cases, just to get out of this. Some of these, the way they arrange the financial agreements, they have liens on everything. We didn't even realize it, but we signed a personal guarantee, and they have rights to our personal property now.
Holy crap.
Can't get out of this damn agreement. Pardon my French,
Wow.
right? So that stuff bothered me. I'm very libertarian minded and very pro consumer too. And these are small businesses that I thought are like pretty darn important for the
Yeah.
economy. And I couldn't believe that they were getting treated this way by
Yeah.
what looked to me by like, and I'm not saying all factors that are out there today, it looked like it was a lot more like this back then. And the markets kind of pushed them to behave better, I'd say, since then. So that really got me kind of fired up. And I said, all right, like if we build a pretty good piece of technology, we can automate some of these pieces that are the areas that these finance companies are trying to solve for with their contracts. We can solve for those issues with technology and
Yeah.
make these arrangements a lot more flexible and forgiving to these small businesses. So that's kind of what spurred it. So long story short, we don't extend credit or underwrite our clients based on anything to do with their credit profile.
Okay.
A lot of factors have moved more to this model, the bigger ones, the more sophisticated ones, but we were, I think, the first, even as our little tiny startup back then. So we also don't set like arbitrary limits. So like, hey, you can only factor this much per month.
Mm.
We don't do stuff like that just to maintain like some credit restrictions. So we used our technology, built our own credit model to offset all the risks from the small and mid-sized company, who are the clients in most of these factoring cases,
Yeah.
create a true non-recourse product where we are never going to come back to them once we fund an invoice or a payment, unless they misrepresented something, either on purpose or by accident. We're not going to come back and say, hey, you owe us money now. We're just going to extend credit to their customer, based our expansion and growth on credit with their customer, because most of them are moving freight for larger businesses anyways than they are, right? So, and we probably know some of the stats, like 90% of the carriers in the US are still about 2 to 5 trucks or 5 trucks and under in fleet size, right? So
Mm.
same thing, most brokers in mid-market are 5 to 25, a lot of smaller forwarders are in that range. So they don't have a lot of assets. And if they have assets, it's their trucks, right? And they're already thin as it is. So it made more sense to build a piece of technology that offset that risk, automate the processes around it so we could provide much better terms and a better experience, and better rates than what was currently offered in the market.
Interesting. Yeah.
So
So
are you integrating with with their platforms, Steve, or are they using yours separately?
Great question. So initially, for the first couple of years, see about 2017 and 2019, we were just, hey, get as many carriers to use the app and factor through the app.
Yeah.
That's not that hard, frankly, and probably still isn't really that hard, and wasn't back then, because most of those small fleet carriers, they don't have a TMS, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, if they can invoice, our app just does the invoicing for them. They put in one point of data, upload a POD, and that's it. We take care of the rest, right?
Right
So
on.
so that was pretty straightforward. But when we started to move into freight broker factoring, and now we do payments for freight brokers, anybody who's really going to continue to expand and has a lot of forward momentum potential, they're probably going to have a TMS, right? Some kind of transportation management system. It's, as a broker or a forwarder, you kind of need a tech layer, because you are in an intermediary in most cases, and that information transfer is part of what your core competency needs to be. So that was kind of the necessity of, okay, we need to support, we'll continue to have a user interface in our apps where brokers and carriers can do funding requests, schedule payments, automate invoices, hop over to load board if they really want to, that we still have up there. But especially for freight brokers, and now we just announced a new TMS for carriers, I'll mention in a second, we're integrating with other third-party systems. So we can be an embedded financial service and payments tool. And that's really the strategy's
that's
pivoted or more
great.
focused in on, is like, I want HaulPay to be in every transportation app in the US at some point, so that we're kind of the standard for embedded financial services.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That is good. So I know you recently spoke at Manifest, the conference in Vegas. Can you share with the audience maybe a little bit of the key takeaways from what you presented?
Yeah. Manifest was awesome. First time there, actually. Probably go back and check it out. It was a great opportunity, by the way, just to break out with customers. That's
Hmm.
priceless. Another piece of business advice: the more
Sure.
FaceTime you can get, not doesn't mean not all the time, but make it a quarterly thing, especially the top 5 or 10 customers. Get that FaceTime. It just
Mm,
there's no substitute for it.
that's great.
So that was fantastic. As far as the key takeaways, they're really trying to emphasize the fact that we can provide uncapped credit based on the customer's size and scope, kind of what I was just mentioning, one of the big differentiators. And then fraud and risk mitigation. So we
Mm,
also, just through this process of starting with carrier factoring, then moving into brokers and broker payments now too, have learned a lot about how you can fudge a freight invoice, how you can try to commit fraud. So we've baked a lot of that into our software as we've continued to develop and mature some of the functionality that protects us, but can also protect our users. So we're really happy about that. We're continuing to invest into that part of the product. But what that basically means, one of the other key takeaways there was, hey, as the economy, especially the freight market, fluctuates, especially when it's a down market, you typically see increases in fraud. It's also very tedious for small, mid-sized carriers and brokers, and even some of the upper mid-market guys to mitigate that fraud. They just don't have the resources, the back office to really do a good job with it. We just roll this in as part of our payments and finance platform for free. We don't even charge anything extra. Just by the nature of how this system works, every payee you have to invite into the network, we vet. And we also track, monitor for anything that falls out of line. So if their authority lapses, they don't have insurance that's valid anymore. These
mm,
are things you would typically pay, like a RMIS or something for. But we just do it for ourselves. We don't do it as thoroughly on some other things. We're probably not as tedious on like the insurance. Let's say if it lapses for a day or so, we're probably not going to catch it, but we do regular rechecks on everything that's in that payee database. But bank account ownership is very important and often overlooked. A lot of brokers and forwarders to this day will just take the information provided by that carrier. They may do a little lookup, but not like a methodical, automated, like we've got a whole thing that's baked into our API and our backend code where we check all these indicators and say, is this actually who they say they are? And is that bank account actually owned by that company or
yeah.
owners of that company? And that's a very big risk point and kind of one of the biggest failure points for fraud and transportation. So I think that was the other big takeaway that I think
Interesting.
is very timely. It's a big topic, and especially the freight intermediary world right now and brokerage, that at least at that payment failure point for fraud, we got you covered.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's
Do you have
awesome.
any other conferences that you're planning to attend that the audience can look for you at?
Yeah, so I will be at the TIA conference in San Antonio, Capital Ideas Conference. That's coming up in I think or not March, April 9th. I can't believe it's already March, right? It's going to be April
Jeez, I
soon.
know.
I know. April 9th, I think, to the 11th in San Antonio. So I will be there. We've got a small booth right next to Highway, who we are integrated and partnered with, by
Yep.
the way. They're doing a great job on some of the onboarding and the other data points that maybe we don't check as thoroughly. And Thai TMS, which is another TMS we're integrated with on the embedded finance side. So we're right
Okay.
there. We'll be at the expo floor, and I'll be there the whole week. That's probably the next most interesting one. I might be going to one of the Freight Waves one. I just haven't decided if I'm going to personally be out there yet. So
Right.
we'll keep that updated on our social.
Great.
So
Good.
you deal with Michael Caney over at Highway?
I don't recognize that name. I've
Mm.
talked to Graph, I think, a few others there. I'm not sure. That would be more of a question for Olivia or Carson, our team who's handling more of the day-to-day and the partnerships. But if you think I should talk to him, I will.
Well, he's the chief commercial officer. So
Yeah,
he's
yeah.
good.
They're moving quick,
Yeah,
so I should talk to him probably.
he's a good human.
Yeah, they have a lot of great folks over there.
Yeah,
Nothing but good things to say about them. So yeah,
that's
no,
awesome.
maybe I'll ask you about it.
Well,
Intro.
KP, I know that you probably got another question. I'm gonna throw a wrench in things real quick.
Okay.
If you were talking to a group of sixth graders,
It's a good
explain
way to phrase it.
explain what you do.
Yeah.
How
So
about fifth, how
I've
about fifth
always,
graders?
How about talking to two Kevins
well,
who
I've always had this
think like sixth
problem.
graders?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So
Touche.
I had to learn this the hard way because when I used to talk to investors, and these are some pretty smart people, you would say
Yeah,
objectively, went to way better schools than I did or could have gotten into. They'd be like, "What the heck are you talking about?"
yeah,
It's just like an alien language with some, especially when you're already in a niche, right? So,
yep.
so what we do is we basically we help basically fund the growth of mid-sized freight companies without increasing their risk of failure. If anything, eliminating it. I think that's the most important takeaway. And then
Yeah.
reducing that risk by, and also at the same time, automating parts of their business that they don't like to do. The most fun thing about being a broker, and that's the thing I'm also proud about our team and our company. Most of the team has been a broker or a carrier or worked in that environment before,
Hmm.
at least about 60% of our team. Um, that gives us a pretty interesting perspective, right? We kind of know what the pains are of what that experience can be like. And especially if you're in a smaller company, like I said in the beginning, when I first started, that contrast between a CH Robinson or like a
Yeah.
Coyote or one of
Yeah.
those for XPO, right? RXO, and the small mid-size that's a startup. A lot of those startups blow up. I mean, Coyote was a startup at some point,
Yep,
right? Might
yep,
take 10 years, but there's many we could think of right now. A
sure.
few in Chattanooga, right? That I connected with when I was at FreightWaves a couple years ago. So, um, but they need the right tools, and there's a lot of stuff that they're just not. If they are good at, it's going to take their focus away on what they really should be focused on. So we make the things that they don't want to have to do profitable and low risk.
Yeah. Yeah. So, talk to the audience a little bit about. I think you joined forces with Dakota Financial a couple of years ago. How has that partnership enhanced your offerings, and are there additional collaborations that might improve your offerings?
Yeah. Funny story, but Michael, the chairman over there, was actually one of my first angel investors, and had always stayed in touch, and we kind of kicked ourselves. We were like, why didn't we do something sooner? Because his company naturally evolved more into the equipment finance side of the trucking market, and we're doing the receivables finance and now payments tech for pretty much the same market, right? Um, Granted, they have more owner operators, I'd say, than what our book looks like, but it was just a natural fit. And it also allowed us to unlock a lot more capital on our balance sheet. So, because um, we're not just providing like a fintech service to other finance companies, like we are the finance company and we're
Hmm.
building our own fintech that we digest. We have to continue to be refinancing or acquiring credit lines, bank relationships, that type of stuff to
Mm-hmm.
fund our growth, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Michael and the Dakota team brings a very deep ocean of larger capacity for that side of the balance sheet of the business. That's been phenomenal. And then the synergies we're just starting to finally explore. It's been about a year and a half now
Okay.
since the deal. On the equipment lease and finance side are starting to work very well with the carrier factoring side for us. So, and not the least of which, and I'll put a teaser out there here today. We haven't done an official announcement, but we are working on some other fleet benefits specific in the payments area that are really going to tie in well with the network of equipment finance companies through Dakota and our own carriers and all these payees that the brokers are paying on our platform. So
Okay.
I'm not going to say much more than that, but maybe you can kind of guess where we're going with it. But it will be some benefits and some ability to spend control, stuff like that, that will help the smaller carriers out that maybe we haven't been able to monetize or could just benefit from things that make us more expansive in the
Yeah.
payment side of the business.
Yeah.
No, that
Yeah.
sounds awesome. I can't wait to hear that.
Yeah. So along those lines, kind of what's your view of how technology is going to reshape the logistics industry in the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, I think process automation is going to be the big hill that everyone's kind of rushing towards,
Mm.
right? So I'm trying to avoid the A, the
Yeah.
AI word, because it's
Yeah.
just so broad, right?
Yeah.
So, but process automation, like some of the stuff that we've done, but frankly, we've done it without a lot of heavy, super sophisticated models or anything, really, just like database process optimization and workflow reordering things in a workflow and making it digital. But there's going to be a lot more opportunity, and I think exploiting of that by freight techs and savvy brokers, maybe that have their own software, or existing TMS are definitely making investments in that area. So I see that as probably the biggest thing that's going to mature a lot over the next 3 to 5 years. And I think it's
Mhm.
going to overflow into the rest of the supply chain and even other parts of the business world, because freight and logistics is there's a lot of little details and they're always in motion. Everything's always in flux and it's very unpredictable.
Yep.
A lot of technology in freight's just trying to get things to more of a predictability level, right? In a way. So by automating more of these processes and some of the stuff we're doing too, de-risking through having more structured data, um, that's another area. So I think you're going to see a lot of that over the next 3 to 5 years. It's going to mature. It may get a little bit commoditized. I think some of the LLMs and the AI tech is going to keep propagating out to, you're going to have different niche companies that build on existing LLM models specific for a niche, sometimes within a niche, right? And they're just going to capture that focus and they're going to kind of become that brand recognized to automate that process. So I see a lot of that happening and a lot of those companies becoming um, very embedded in other transportation management systems too.
Okay.
Yeah, that's great.
All right. So put your consulting hat on. So, what kind of advice would you give logistics professionals right now to how to adapt to all the changes in freight finance and all the things that you just mentioned?
Yeah, well, I think try to mitigate your debt. So that's actually probably the third takeaway from Manifest was just emphasizing again that, the way that we do finance is not debt on your balance sheet, technically. We're buying it, basically. We're buying both the asset and the liability in a way by buying your invoice. That's literally what's happening on the finance side of our business.
Hmm.
So if you can find ways to not increase your debt load, but increase your cash flow,
Mm.
find a very good rate, because you got to be careful with factoring agreements. Check the actual effective rate on the total invoice, because that adds up quick. If it's effective rate to you as a broker or forwarder is something as high as 3 or 4%, like that's 36 to 48% annual rate. That's really expensive, right? We're
Yeah.
actually closer because of some funny things that we do that others don't, with letting them pass on costs to like the carrier side and the quick fees. We're closer to effective rates in the 1 to 1.4% range per month. So that's in line with a line of capital from a
Yep.
bank or
Right.
an asset-based lender if you're growing as a brokerage, but it's not debt. So try to be mindful of debt. Don't go into too much if you can avoid it. Oftentimes we can do carve outs for banks that want to offer a supplemental line of credit. In some cases, we can even do that to work with other partners for companies like that. The other thing I would keep in mind is just continue to look at ways to automate your back office and really keep your ear to the ground on technology trends on that and that process automation area,
Yeah.
right? So if I can do the task that takes your business, uh, if I can do that task 5 times faster, my overhead's lower. I can invest more in marketing. I
Right.
can acquire better talent. It all rolls up to that war chest. As small as it is for whatever limited scope or demo or region you're working in, they, others can have an advantage over you. And there's plenty of room in the market of people and brokerages and forwarders focused in different markets. Tons collaboration, fantastic. But you don't want to get left behind. And it's something we even have to remember, right? There's fintechs out there that have hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars in investment. So where can we focus? That's going to have like the power law that we're going to see the most return the fastest, that continues to buy more time and then step up our efficiencies to stay up and stay ahead of the market. So that would be the other road. Try to and if you need help figuring that out, there's one word of advice: junior software engineers right now from some of the best schools can't get jobs. all the senior guys are using these AI tools, and they're not hiring the junior guys anymore. They're really smart. They're technically savvy. Sometimes you can get them as interns. If you're a brokerage or a forwarder and you're trying to figure out how to implement some of this technology, hire them as an intern.
That's a good shout out. Yeah, that's awesome.
And they'll work on for your summer for, hourly, and they get some experience, and then they
Yeah,
can finally get their foot in the door. It's getting harder for some of the junior tech savvy
yeah,
college grads to even get jobs right
Yeah.
now. So
yeah,
pro tip there too.
Yeah.
yeah.
I think that's great advice, because I think that one of the things that we'll see in that space is we may see some of those junior software engineers end up being solution architects in different types of systems.
Absolutely.
They may not be writing the code, but they may be the architect for, laying things out. So I think that's,
Totally
I
agree.
think that's great advice to companies to be
good
looking
point,
at
yeah.
people with that skill set, that mindset, because they can do amazing things.
Yep. And they may, like you said, they may not be writing code as much, but they know how it works, and they can do prompt engineering.
Yep.
That seemed like it's hard for me too. Like, I'm more of a product, like I said, more of a building type, and like it's just a lot going on, and especially if you're a business owner or an executive at a firm or something. Like, you're already supposed to be the supreme generalist in a way in
Yeah.
most cases, right? Before you get too specialized, you kind of have to be. So that would be something I would recommend for sure.
Yeah. No, great advice.
Yeah, that is good. So listen, Steve, you mentioned leadership earlier. I'd love to get kind of your take, your brand of leadership. What's that like?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's very democratic. But there are points where I just kind of set the table for certain things for sure. I really want the team members to feel like they have a stake in especially in key decision making. I want them to be as autonomous as possible.
Mm,
It's a lead from the front more than a lead from the rear. Means I'm not going to ask you to do something that I wouldn't do myself, even if it's really painful. Most of the time, because I've been a founder, I've had a couple little tiny small businesses along the way, but especially this last founder stint, I've probably done some version of that already myself anyways, right? So especially bootstrapping, kind of being a little scrappier. So definitely more of a lead from the front, democratic style, get feedback from everyone, and then also for me, it helps me to make better decisions, because I really want to interview
sure.
sometimes individually and then together as a group, like my directors and direct reports. And I guess the last thing I would just suggest on the leadership front, which I'm trying to do more of, is um, go directly to the frontline staff sometimes. Tell your directors or folks that report to you, if you do have a management structure, you want to do that every once in a while, because it's going to help you also coach them better too.
That's good. Yeah,
100%. Love
yeah,
that. That's,
yeah.
Kevin and I both learned that early on
Yep.
from
Yeah,
the
I've
way we
learned
were
it.
at.
It's
Yeah.
just add that little extra. It's
Yeah.
just so much better to tie it all together. It's a closed loop,
Yeah.
at that point.
100%. I agree with that. Love that.
So Steve, how does our audience get in touch with you? Maybe provide your website, all that information. If they want to get more
Yeah.
information.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can go to haulpay.io. That's our current website for HaulPay, all things product related, payments, factoring. Got a great news section. We're publishing some good content on there. We're also keeping everyone updated with all our integrations. Like, we just announced one yesterday, the day before, Journey TMS. It's a carrier centric TMS. So um, we're going to continue to have more integrations, like I mentioned, our strategy. So all the news that you want to see and everything should be accessible from the website, haulpay.io. We're also trying to be more active on LinkedIn. We've got a page on there. We've got our major social channels. So we've got an X page. So we publish most of our updates across all the social X, LinkedIn, Facebook, and even Instagram sometimes. So check us out there. And if you have questions specifically for me, you can probably reach out on LinkedIn. It kind of keeps things away from my other main inbox for email, or just reach out to support and they'll filter it to me if it makes sense. Or someone on our team, all fantastic, will help you out.
Right on.
Or we'll look for you at Manifest next year, right?
Yeah, I'll be there. That's
Yeah.
the plan.
And KP, because we are manifesting our future, we'll invite Steve to be a part of the inaugural Kev Talks conference in 2027.
I like that.
Yeah,
I'm
let me
putting it
know.
out there, making it. I'm making an announcement.
I love that.
Fantastic.
Yep.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then just also, I do advise a few other startups in the kind of supply chain fintech cross section. So yeah, it's exciting. I'm happy to help anytime I can if time allows for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
Well,
this
we
has been
appreciate.
really good.
Yeah, we appreciate you so much, Steve. It's good to see you again, man.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's try to
Good.
find a way to connect soon.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. This
yeah.
has
Next
been
time
great.
we're out there, we'll let you know.
Yeah.
Perfect.
We learned a lot. This was really good. I love the innovation. I love the offering. I love, you doing this type of work in our industry. So thanks for that work, and thanks for sharing your story. And to our audience, look for us on all platforms. And thanks for joining us today.
No, appreciate you, Steve.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Steve.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Kev Talks, Real World Global Logistics. If today's discussion inspired you, don't forget to follow, subscribe, rate, and share our podcast.
Remember, every great journey in logistics starts with a single step forward. Let's continue working together to transform the industry.